I'll preface this by saying that I made a lot of bad choices in this scenario. It was a rough time in my life where I was very emotionally vulnerable and struggling with drinking and recovering from an abusive relationship, so I didn't handle this situation in the healthiest way. If it were to happen today, I would do things very differently, not that it excuses the guy's behavior in the least. So, a little over a year ago, I began talking with this guy I matched with on Tinder while he was visiting my city. We didn't get the chance to meet up while he was there, but continued talking for a few weeks until he came back. We texted and talked on the phone, and the chemistry was off the charts. We made plans to meet for drinks upon his return visit to my city. When I got to the bar, he was there with his friend. Okay, not a total deal breaker, but kind of weird. A heads up would have been nice. I introduce myself to the guys and sit down next to my date, facing his friend. Something about the vibe is just wrong. His friend seems nice enough, but my date is making me really uneasy. The chemistry we had on the phone just wasn't translating to real life. He didn't seem engaged in the conversation, was giving short answers and literally swiping through Tinder while sitting next to me. I would have chalked it up to him not being attracted to me, except he ran his hand up my legs and then tried to touch my breasts. I slapped his hand away and said very loudly, "If you touch me again without my consent, I'm leaving." This immediately sours the mood and makes it awkward as hell between the three of us. He told me to calm down. In retrospect, I definitely should have left then, but I was working on relearning my self-worth and establishing boundaries and struggling a lot with that. I stupidly hoped the situation was salvageable. I don't quite remember how the conversation went from there, but somehow we all got back on track, kind of. The friend seemed a lot more personable and frankly safer than my date, so I talked more to him. They eventually wanted to leave, and I suggested a nearby arcade bar, which they agreed to. But we ended up walking to their Airbnb instead, where they asked me to come upstairs with them. I don't know why I agreed, because literally every fiber of my being was screaming at me not to, but I did. Once I got upstairs, I almost immediately started having a panic attack. The room was spinning, and I had to stick my head out of a window to get some fresh air and to feel like I could breathe. Meanwhile, the guys were just laughing and joking. They asked me to come to the kitchen to see something. I didn't feel right about it and asked what it was, and they said, "Just come see it." I went to the entrance of the kitchen, but couldn't bring myself to move any closer to them. My date then said, "Come here, we're going to make a video." I grabbed my shoes and ran out of there as fast as I could. As soon as I got a few blocks away to a populated area, I blocked him on every platform we were connected on. I don't know what would have happened had I stayed there any longer and entered that kitchen. I don't even want to. Please, 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 if you have a bad feeling about a guy or situation, be smarter than I was and trust your instincts. They exist to keep you safe. I'm hitting the Wayback Machine here. Many years ago in high school, I took out a girl who I thought was a nice, normal person. A basic dinner and movie. I thought I might get a chance to make out with her if the evening went well. The very first thing she did when she got into my car is ask if I had any cocaine to pep her up. What the fuck? It's 1977, I'm 18, and I'm driving a Volkswagen and working at a grocery store. Not exactly the kind of person who's going to be packing coke, and it was more of an adult drug in any case. As I had no cocaine, she asked me to drive by a friend's house to, quote, get a joint, just to get the evening going. This friend turned out to be a small-time pot dealer in a crappy neighborhood. She asked me to go in and get the bag. I declined. She asked me to pay for it. Again, I declined. So she goes in and, I found this out later, gives the guy a hand job for about 1/4 of an ounce. She then proceeds to smoke away while I'm driving us to the restaurant. I get a contact buzz, but I didn't smoke any. PCP-laced pot was all the rage those days. I didn't know it was laced, but didn't want to take the chance. Dinner was an extended affair due to her condition, and the fact that she got up twice and smoked while in the can. It was pretty embarrassing, really, but she had a loose shirt on and was not being particularly modest, so I hung in there. Hey, I was 18. We were way too late to make the movie by the time we finished dinner, so we went driving around for a bit. We wound up in a secluded area, we get friendly, and she goes down on me. Things were looking up. Until she gets sick all over everything. I end up washing out the interior of my car and our clothes at one of those 25-cent wand-type self-car wash places. I get her cleaned up, we drive around some more until our clothes are more or less dry, and I take her home. The next morning, her dad calls the house and accuses me of getting her high and taking advantage of her. He's calling the cops, telling my parents, etc. I just told him to go fuck himself and to look in her room for the remaining pot. He ends up calling me back several hours later and apologizes. He tells me that he found multiple drugs, bongs, and other paraphernalia. A few days later, she ends up asking me out. Apparently, our date had been good for her. I declined. So many adventures, so I'll stick with the highlights. Dinner seemed to go alright, except that he drank most of a shared pitcher of margaritas by himself, and then drank all the liquor I had at home. I was kind of irked, so we went searching for more. The first place was closing up, as it was Sunday, so he goes up and bangs on the windows, loudly demanding that they sell us some beer and calling them assholes while I die of embarrassment. At the next place, after they served us, he casually says, "Oh yeah, I don't have any money, so you're gonna have to get that." Not that I expected him to pay for my beer, but he expected me to pay for his. In conversation, he mentioned that his favorite book was Ulysses, and compared himself to Jack Kerouac. I asked him what kind of movies he liked, only for him to snottily retort that he watches, quote, films. He had me read a short story he wrote that, frankly, was pretty terrible, but when I offered him polite criticism, he got angry and said I just didn't understand. That was the problem with being a, quote, natural writer, he said. No one understands. At one point during the evening, he wanted to check on his dog. He said it wasn't far, but it turned out to be a long drive to the middle of nowhere. Nothing was open, and I had to piss really bad. It was the most resentful roadside pee imaginable. After he snapped at me about not understanding his writing, I said I was tired and that he should go. He then asked me for $3 for gas. I wanted him gone so much I actually gave it to him, and then I deleted his number. It was a blind double date with my roommate's girlfriend and a friend that she was bringing to meet me. The girls met us at our apartment and we split a bottle of wine before cabbing to a nightclub they wanted to visit. Inside the club, the girls immediately made for the bar and started slamming back triple zombies. Over the span of the following hour, they got steadily more and more inebriated while my roommate and I fumed. By the time my buddy's girlfriend retired to the washroom to vomit, we had agreed that the date was over and we just wanted to go home. My roommate tried to extract his girlfriend from the washroom and get her home. Now on my own with the other girl, she started pulling fire alarms in the club, which immediately got us both kicked out. Now out on the street, she started walking away, and I tried to keep her company, suggesting I get her into a cab to get her home. She just collapses on a storefront step, crying that no one loves her. Not even a minute later, she jumps up and starts throwing bricks through the shop windows. When I tried to stop her, she ran diagonally across a busy intersection screaming, "Someone help me, I'm being chased!" Several cars full of well-intentioned dudes at multiple points around the intersection saw me, a big bald guy who radiates, quote, fascist in a 5-foot radius, chasing this pretty petite girl. As a dozen angry guys converged on me, I saw her dive headfirst into a passing cab's passenger window as it took off, her legs still sticking out of the window. The guys weren't interested in believing my story, and I took some thumps in general principle before hightailing it. 3 days later, I got a message related to me via my roommate's girlfriend. It just asked me, do I have her shoes? No, I did not have her shoes. I was 20 and in college. I'm female. I had met this kid in my ethics class, somewhat pertinent, and he seemed nice. We would talk briefly and he seemed like a fine guy. I worked on campus at a coffee shop, and when he stopped by, I'd give him free samples just to be friendly. We had exchanged numbers to work on a class project, but he texted me one day to ask if I wanted to come down to his dorm room to watch a movie. Since we weren't 21, dorm parties were a regular occurrence and I thought nothing of it. He told me there would be some guys there from his hall and I agreed. I showed up to his dorm room and, lo and behold, there was no one else there, not even his roommate. So, this was a date. Alright, kind of weird that you told me there would be other people here, but I'll just roll with it. He turns on Superbad and we watch in silence. Out of nowhere, he says, "You know, I'm really good at eating girls out." I was flabbergasted because this came out of nowhere and was pretty awkward. I kinda laughed it off and said something along the lines of, "Good for you?" Silently, we kept watching. I should have listened to my instincts to get the hell out of there, but I just felt too awkward. Suddenly, he was asking me all of these inappropriate sexual questions. How many people have you had sex with? I'm not shy, so I gave him an answer, but it took me a minute or two to think of it. He got all up in my face and said, You're dirty. It took you that long to think of all the guys?" The number was 5, so really not that many. Everything turned into a competition, and this next bit was the last straw. Still in that competitive mindset, he then says, "I bet I've had a harder life than you." I say, "Why?" Well, fuck me for asking. He then gets up and pulls out a large knife from his top bedside drawer and tells me that his brother held it to his neck when he was a kid. I immediately grabbed my coat and ran the fuck out of there. I got back to my dorm and started banging on my friend's door to let me in. I looked behind me down the hallway and there he was, the kid, following me. My friend finally answered the door and I charged in, slamming the door behind me, automatically locking it. I drank a lot of vodka that night. I don't want to make this story too long, but I met this guy on Tinder that I really liked, and we went out dancing and to get drinks. We had been talking for weeks, but this was our second time going out together. During the time we were talking, there were a lot of little red flags that would tell me that he drank too much, but I was a lot younger and naive back then and tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Anywho, out of nowhere, he's like, "Let's go outside." He starts messing around on his phone and is telling me, "I'm trying to find us a way out of here," and said that the guys standing by the door were after him. So I'm like, okay, let's go back to my car so maybe we can go somewhere else. My car was parked pretty far away because we had gone to multiple locations that night. Anyway, he gets into his head that multiple people are after him, like random people on the street. Once we were in a part of downtown that wasn't so busy, nobody around, he started to think that I was out to get him too. I was trying to call his friend, who was nearby, to come and get him, but he took my phone away from me because he thought I was trying to call the police. And then he threatened me. I got really scared because I thought, if he hurts me and leaves me out here, nobody's gonna find me until morning, and it was pretty cold out. His friend did eventually come and got him and left. Once I was safe, I was jittery all night from the anxiety of having been in rocky relationships before. I told him about it the next morning, and he just didn't seem to remember any of it. I broke things off shortly after. I went on a date with a girl not knowing that her ex-boyfriend was in a local Mexican gang. She had just broken up with him about a week prior. He didn't take that well. On top of being a garbage human for physically and mentally abusing her, did I mention that he was in a fucking gang? She and I went out on a whole date, multiple places, and back to her house to drop her off. I don't realize until I'm leaving the parking lot of the restaurant we went to that we're being followed, all the way back to her house. I dropped her off and the guy continued to follow me. Being aware of him now, I don't go home. I make intentional turns and things to confirm that he's following, and he was. I called the girl and she said not to go home and that she'll call me back. She did indeed call me back 20 minutes later after I drove through 2 different police stations and she said, "You're okay to go home now, just act normal," which isn't sketchy at all. I did go home, and he followed and drove off. I walked to my apartment door and there's 30 plus Mexican gang members there and her cousin who's in that gang, as well as her brother who isn't but knows them. I had never met any of them before, so I was like, I'm dying today. The brother asked how I'm doing and said, "Just go inside, you're good." They stood outside my door and in my apartment complex for 4 hours and then went home after the brother knocked on my door and said that should never happen again. That girl I took on the date, we ended up dating for 3 years and now she's my wife, and we had our first baby in September and celebrated our first year of marriage last week. So from 16 to 34, I was in a committed relationship. I got divorced and found myself looking into online dating. I was also extra broke, so I looked at stuff like OkCupid. Here's a memorable one. One guy was really cute. Lots of tattoos, muscular, easily twice my size. He loved Carpenter films and Nightmare Before Christmas. We chatted on and off for a month or so, but we lived an hour apart. Finally, we make a date and meet up at a bar after work to shoot some pool. He starts pulling my hair, I'm guessing in a way that he thought was sexy. It wasn't. I had 2 drinks in 2 hours and was ready to go home. He wasn't nearly as charming in person. Oh well. We go out to the parking lot where he picks me up, sits me in his truck, pulls out his penis, which is the size of my forearm by the way, and proceeds to tell me that I am going to give him head. He basically tries to rip my jeans off while also trying to shove my head between his legs. I fight my way out of it, basically threatening to scream bloody murder and scramble to my car and drive home. I knew I was lucky he let me go. I had no intention of ever seeing that guy ever again. I'm getting my stuff ready to go to work the next day and realize that I'd lost my ID somewhere. I call the bar and they don't have it. Fuck, I gotta call the creep. Nope, he doesn't have it either. But he does have a lecture for me about how I'm a tease and that's why I'm single. Because I lead guys on. I'm such a cock tease, blah blah blah. It's so messed up that he now has blue balls because I let him on. I just want my ID, but he denies that he has it. Fine, fuck it, I guess I'll get a new one. My lost ID shows up in my mailbox a week later in a plain envelope that had not been mailed. The idea that he was outside my house without my knowledge really creeped me out.